Trust in AI. Building confidence in healthcare innovation.
Good. Okay. Hey, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion. First of all, I'd like to thank Dylan and the team for putting on such an amazing show. It's my first trip to MedTech World. He's asked me for 5 years to come. I finally made it to Malta. I'm so glad I made it. What a beautiful city, what an amazing country, and hospitality for the last couple of days. So thank you so much for that. Of course, we've got a wonderful panel here, and we'll explore the conversation around trust and AI and adoption over the next 35 minutes. The first thing to do is put into context. AI at the moment it shows much promise. Every conversation you think about is around AI and LLMs and healthcare. And healthcare is one vertical where AI seems to have the most promise, the most advantage in healthcare going forward, from diagnostics to treatment and to prevention, from surgical robotics to imaging and navigation tools. It's really quite exciting. And we can spend a whole afternoon talking about the concept of innovation with AI. At the same time, there's a fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves. Where's the trust? I'll explore that over the next half an hour. There's three questions that we'll kind of explore during the next half an hour. The first one is, will doctors be happy with using AI to help diagnose and treat disease? And humans, will they be part of the loop or out of the loop? From the patient perspective, will they be comfortable with AI being a part and parcel of their treatment pathway? We have to ask that question from that perspective. The third question is around data and transparency, and also the ethics, where innovation is rapid, but regulation lags behind. How do we adopt fast transition with regulatory practices that sometimes are much slower? There are three concepts we're going to explore over the next half an hour with this wonderful panel. But let's ask the panel to introduce themselves first and foremost. We'll start with Geeta at the far end.
Well, again, thank you so much to Dylan, Yulia, and the whole MedTech Malta team. This has been a wonderful experience, and what a beautiful, beautiful country, and my first time here. So I'm honored to be a part of the panel. The quick background on myself: I'm a physician executive. I've had a number of health tech roles. I was the former chief medical officer of Salesforce, AT&T, and a number of big tech companies. I am now a speaker and writer of the best-selling book, Dead Wrong, on Myths and Disinformation in the Era of Health Tech. And I'm thrilled to be a part of the conversation, so thank you for having me.
But you did mention your book, Geeta. What's your book called?
So the book is called Dead Wrong, available on Amazon. Smile, tinkle, tinkle, right? But really, when we talk about trust, and I know we're going to get into it, I mean, we are living in a time where, because of so much innovation, technology, AI, social media, all the things that you know, Dr. TikTok is who everyone trusts, right? And so we have to understand the context in which we are innovating, the context of which the consumer is sitting, and that is who they're listening to right now, Shafi. So that's part of the ecosystem that has very much changed the consumer landscape. I'm excited to talk about it.
Thank you. Thanks for joining this panel and giving your expertise. And we'll plug the book in at the end, of course. Ken.
Again, thanks everyone for coming out here today. I'm Kenneth, and I'm a biomedical engineer by background. And I've been helping medical device manufacturers get their CE mark and place on the EU market, and more recently into the AI space, helping those AI as a medical device get to the market. And again, more recently with the EU AI Act, which, I mean, it's great to hear, even in the previous speaker, he mentioned this, so it's good to get into this.
Yeah, we'll explore that as we go on. Yoav.
So my name is Yoav. This is my second time here. Last time I was here under a different context. This time I'm here under the context of INEX Data, which is the leading center of excellence for clinical AI in Israel. It's an integral part of the innovation hub of Tel Aviv Medical Center. Tel Aviv Medical Center is unique. I think it really is the largest untapped potential of healthcare innovation in Europe, in my unbiased opinion. It's the #1 trial site in Europe. It's a large institution. It is unique because of this INEX Data, which is a team of 50 experts across DevOps, data science, full stack engineering, all developing autonomously and with full backing of the hospital, AI clinical solutions for the hospital.
Great, thank you all for joining us. So we'll go straight into the first question for our panel. And again, we'll start with Geeta. What does trust mean to you? as a clinician, as advisor for global companies working in the industry as well as in clinical context. What does it mean for you?
So I think more than what it means for me is what does it mean for my patients, right? And what does it mean for the everyday consumer of healthcare? And I'm a big believer that we're all patients, right? We've all been sick. We've all had to take care of someone who's sick. And trust is when I have a problem, presumably in healthcare it's a medical problem, right? And you show up for me, and I am able to access you, call you, text you. Access is not an issue, right? I'm able to get in touch with you. Can I have a regulatory problem, right? How do you help me with this? And we likely have history together, right, Shafi? So likely, not only do I have a problem, but you've helped me in the past, and when you partner with me, we have success. That's trust. It's when I have a problem, you show up for me, I get in touch with you, and we do it again and again. And it's mutual, by the way. When you have a problem, I'm also there, right? We're on the same side. And when you look at the whole paradigm of trust in healthcare, at least domestically speaking, as a US physician, we fall down on all of that, right? Number one, access. If you try to get an appointment in today's environment, certainly in the specialty space with all the workforce shortages that we have, you can't get an appointment for 6 to 9 months, depending where you are in the country. Secondly, you're lucky if you get a doctor. You might get a PA, you might get a nurse, and definitely if you come back, you're not seeing the same person, so there's no real establishing of a rapport or relationship. And lastly, the visit begins and ends in the 5 or 10 minutes you have in the office. Right? So access is a big part of this, knowledge transfer, and being able to talk to me with respect and in a language and at a level that I can understand, right? So that I feel that you actually understand me, are empathetic, and it's a two-way conversation. And those are really the places where we're failing for the most part, Shafi, when we look at trust, particularly in the US.
Yeah, thanks very much. Keith, from a regulatory perspective, and I know that's your big interest, what does trust mean to you?
So with respect to, let's say, medical devices in the AI space, obviously trust it's a massive issue, not just for the patient, but the healthcare professional. So as you may know, medical devices in the EU, for example, it's regulated by the EU medical device regulation. And it's not an easy regulation to meet, to meet those requirements. But when you have these high-risk AI systems, and they are meeting these requirements, they are being assessed by third-party notified bodies, you sort of increase the trust. If they are on the market, it means that they've gone through a certain level of scrutiny. So they understand, you would understand as a healthcare professional that, okay, look, this result that I'm getting, it means something, and it is, I can trust it. My issue comes more down from from those devices which are getting placed on the market, which might be flying under the radar as low-risk products, and which are maybe based on LLMs, which might be hallucinating, and giving maybe some incorrect advice to the healthcare professional or to the patient. So those are the ones that I'd love to focus on and to make sure that even on how did they get to the market? Should they be on the market? And it's what people need to, be, maybe even the healthcare professionals, they need to be more skeptical of these devices. With the EU AI Act, it adds on an additional level of requirements for these sort of devices, which is, fantastic. They're still regulated by the MDR, but then there's this additional level. And that is going to increase, or at least it should increase the trust in not just healthcare products, but any sort of high-risk AI systems, these foundation models. So this is the current regulatory landscape, I'd say.
Thank you for that. And so we've had the regulatory perspective, we've had the clinician and patient perspective. Now, upstairs, you see a bunch of innovators, a lot of startups, amazing startups. I've walked around, do get a chance to speak to the guys who come upstairs. Amazing device and technology they're producing. From an innovation perspective, Yoav, and you're obviously heading innovation in Tel Aviv, and also for early startups, what does trust mean to them?
So if I look at it from the perspective of the tech behind it, transparency is critical. And I don't mean what's written in the code in Python. I mean the sense of why are these decisions or recommendations happening? Consistency is critical. If I have some algorithm that detects sepsis, it needs to work in Denmark just like it works in the Dominican Republic. Clinical rigor and not just AUC is important. defined governance and guardrails, and I kind of agree with what you're insinuating here, is that the AI is moving faster than the governance, which creates a lot of kind of disconnect and dichotomy. Ethical behavior is important. Again, the hallucination, again, databases behind it that really are inclusive, well diversified. And I think once these factors come in together, we'll see more and more things that are not just pure throughput, but are actually making an impact on performance, whatever that metric is, whether it's clinical, non-clinical, it doesn't matter, inpatient, outpatient, but that move from just more and more and more and more and faster, faster, faster to we're actually going to have things that are defined. But those are kind of the main factors that I think are underpinning trust.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's important for the innovators and the accelerators, the incubators to understand how they can help support that innovation in a way that's measured, that's more safe and compliant to regulation, I guess, right? But regulation lacks way behind the pace of innovation, as I mentioned earlier. So from your perspective in terms of regulation, Ken, where are we? You mentioned the EU AI Act. I was actually in Paris last year when they announced the second part of the Safety Summit, and we had Emmanuel Macron talking about the future of AI. And the year before, we had Rishi Sunak in the UK with the AI Safety Act, for example. So governments are thinking about this on a much more global scale. Can you tell the audience where we are, maybe EU on a more global perspective, where regulation sits and where it is deficient currently?
Okay, I mean, this is a really loaded question. And I mean, I'm obviously, again, I'm a regulatory consultant, so I'm sort of always biased.
You can be political, it's okay.
No, it's okay. But the truth is, let's say, the AI Act, it was, you know, it is enforced, but it's not enforced maybe to the level it should yet. It doesn't apply to all technology just yet. So let's say we mentioned medical devices. They do have till 2027 to start really implementing it properly. Next year, 2026, we have a deadline, a big deadline, for other high-risk technology. So this could be anything from, let's say, banking and finance sort of AI systems, which are considered high risk. But at the moment, something which does apply is AI requirements for these foundational models. And the amount of lobbying that's going on in the background is incredible. And these aren't, I mean, from lobbying from startup groups or whatever. These are from big tech. And it's, again, the AI Act is about transparency. So you start to say, why are they lobbying it so much that it's actually having such a great effect? And when I see such a big resistance to something, to big tech, I mean, it's not. It's to me, it raises some alarms and saying, okay, there is something wrong, and this act is doing something right. That's the way I'm thinking, anyway. But a lot of people are digging their head in the sand, I'd say, with the AI Act, whether it's other high-risk AI systems. But yeah, I mean, in general, I think the uptake has been quite slow, and I'm hoping to see more awareness about that, even from the deployer's end. So even the healthcare facilities that might be deploying and using these AI systems, the healthcare professional needs to be aware of the rigor that has gone through, for this product to be in front of them, or lack thereof. They need to understand how the AI system is working. And this is all coming through the AI Act. It requires that these people have a certain level of AI literacy, that's what it's called, which is important. It's not just using a product and it's giving me a result and I'm just trusting it blindly.
Yeah. So that's great, and we have the EU AI Act, and you've eloquently summarized that. Should we deregulate? And I ask the question for a simple reason, and I'll come to it in a second, because Executive Order 14179, Donald Trump, okay? More from a geopolitical perspective, he wants to remove barriers to American leadership in AI. He's worried about China taking over AI and other countries. So they're saying, let's take away regulation, let's adopt much faster, and take risk as a government. Is that the answer, Ken?
I mean, take it like this. When in physiology, and I guess I'll look at you, when you have a system, a biological system, which doesn't have controls, what happens? It just keeps growing. It's like a cancer. So you have to have controls in place. And I mean, I'm going to say I understand Donald Trump, but I understand that there
You understand Donald Trump, you said?
I'm not saying that.
Congratulations.
But in the sense that it is obviously an industry which they have to compete with, right? I mean, there's always, the space race. There's always something they need to be the best of, and I mean that's great. But I wouldn't say deregulate, remove certain barriers.
Sure.
But when it comes to innovation, I definitely support innovation. But it doesn't mean at all costs. What is the cost of that?
Sure. There's a balance. I agree with you. Geeta, we're not disparaging against the US at all, but obviously with your vast experience, could you give us a sense of where you've seen AI being adopted with those global companies that you've worked for successfully, and what are the barriers and challenges when you're using AI for some of the solutions that you described before?
You bet. I mean, look, it's rarely about the technology. When we talk about successes or failure in technology, it's rarely about the technology. It's more about culture, implementation, expectations, right? And so the barriers, and whether we're talking about AI, whether we're talking about the electronic health revolution, digital health, all the things we've seen to date, the innovations we've seen to date, largely those failures are a lack of understanding of clinical workflows, a lack of understanding the day in the life of doctors, nurses, patients, right? What are their problems? What is the problem you're trying to solve with your innovation as opposed to this really shiny, glittery object, right? So I think for the innovators out there, being really mindful that you want to ensure clinical leadership early, not late, being very sure you understand the workflow and the problem you're solving. Too often we solve 3 problems but create 5 new ones in innovation, and I'm sure there's 25 more that are going to happen with the era of AI that we're living in. 2, cultural expectations, right? We are in the business of humanity. If you are in this room, if you are about medicine and healthcare, this is not about automating judgment and empathy in my mind, right? Very similar to the pilot driving the plane. Let the pilot drive the plane. Let doctors and nurses do what they are meant to do. And all of the, we're friends here, right? And all of the BS, put AI on that, right? The giving out the coffee, the Diet Coke on the plane, that doesn't need to be your doctor or nurse, right? So when we think about all of the administrative burden, particularly in the US, that we've made our pilots, our doctors and nurses do, patients want to see the eyeballs of a person that is empathetic and exercises good judgment with the best tools available to them to practice. Now, if that happens to be AI, terrific. If that happens to be another digital health technology, terrific. But patients are not coming for the technology. Patients are coming to me, Dr. G, because they trust me, they know that I have good resources available to me, and they trust my judgment in partnership with them. And so I think keeping our eye on the goal is incredibly critical. And lastly, while there are any number of shiny objects out there and really sexy, provocative solutions, if you keep it simple, there are any number of low-hanging fruit in healthcare, whether it's triage, prior auth, simple things that can be automated in the diagnostic space, right? But this idea, when you talk to a lot of technologists, a lot of innovators, some of you upstairs with booths, they're so focused on replacing the doctor, replacing the nurse, replacing the pilot of the plane. That is not yet the problem that we need to solve. There are thousands of problems before that one, and so my biggest advice to you all is to start with the basics and understand that it is about augmenting the workforce, keeping the human in the loop, keeping the best technology and innovations available to the staff, but the ultimate final decision requires human judgment. We are very much at a crux in understanding the limits of innovation and even understanding AI for a large part. And so I think we have to keep the human parts where they belong and the technology pieces where they belong.
So I'm going to challenge you on that, Geeta, because you mentioned human judgment, empathy, all the kind of things. There was a paper a while ago that talked about LLMs and AI being more empathetic than humans because they had more time to ask the questions and show some empathy, for example. We're rushed, we have little time. So do we hold AI to a higher standard than doctors? Because we make errors, we make bad judgments, we think about our biases. So why are we holding it to such a high standard and not hold doctor physicians the same standard?
You know, there's no question that there will be errors no matter what,
Sure.
right? Whether the plane is being driven by a human or driven by a pilot. But, I don't have one patient, and I would challenge you as well, Shafi, right? How many people want to see an AI robot that was programmed to be empathetic versus a human that is genuinely empathetic, genuinely concerned about you, genuinely sharing your pain, and genuinely making a best judgment?
It depends on how you define genuine.
Right?
I think that's the question, right?
Well, that's a judgment call.
Sure.
That's a judgment call, right? But, I'm a big fan of Star Wars. I'm sure many of the nerds in here are as well. I love R2-D2. I think R2-D2 is really cool. I don't want R2-D2 delivering my baby, delivering my grandbaby, right? Because empathy is what patients are looking for. When you study empathy, when you study trust, when you study what patients actually want from their doctor, the metric that they walk away with and they look for to know if their doctor actually listened to them and they feel like, okay, this is someone I can trust. You know what it is, Shafi? And a surgeon may or may not understand this, and I can say that because I'm married to a surgeon. It's when patients look at the eye time. It's the amount of time that we as physicians look them in the eye, right? Now, many of you have partners out there, family members, friends. I know exactly when my husband is listening to me and when I'm not, when he's not, right? When he's looking at me, I know he's listening to me. When he's like, right? He's not listening to me. And the answer is, right? So that's empathy. It's this understanding that you are actually processing what I'm saying and then coming up with a decision. And the reason, and I would also double click on that to say the reason when we say because doctors and nurses are not empathetic, why is it that they're not empathetic? It is because they are overloaded with data entry, menial tasks that don't make sense. It's not because they went into the profession of medicine because they're cold-hearted souls, right? So the better question is to say, how can we use AI to unburden our staff so that they can be empathetic as they are as humans, right?
So you're making more time for them. I think it's about time and having the space to think about them. I agree with you. I don't take things personally about surgeons. I'm absolutely okay with that, Geeta. But nonetheless, Yoav, innovation. My question to you is around, okay, AI is there. We've seen about the regulations. How do you advise companies around AI? Can you give examples of successes navigating through that kind of a convoluted pathway around regulation? And give experiences from your center, which is one of the best centers in the world, right?
Allegedly. No, I think it's one of the best centers in the world. I haven't seen something like this, and when I talk to Humana or Centene or Privia, this ability to have 50 people who are autonomous and back to do it. I want to begin because I agree with you entirely about the BS component from the startup and the innovator perspective. There's a significant amount of confusion around it, right? And it's this
a lot of hype, right? I think hype.
True, but I try to look at it from a little bit deeper in the sense of I see all these innovations, whether they're from my department, external startups, and the confusion is around what kind of AI do I even use? And you're right, there's so many use cases where AI isn't even necessary. I just need an effective decision tree node and presenting the right information at the right time. And there's other situations where there's just a disconnect between the situation and the startup. Like if I have a bunch of, multimodal parameters, a lot of variance in the data, real time, whatever, that's not generative yet. That's not agentic. That is machine learning proper. And there's situations where generative does work or agentic does work. So I'm seeing a lot of that disconnect also. Those, to get to your point, those that really understand that connection are the ones who are able to succeed. And from the regulatory pathway, the kind of regulatory literacy that they know is critical, right? And understanding that per that use case. And that literacy, I'm not expecting a startup that's pre-seed to come in and say, this is my regulatory pathway, this is whatever, but they do need to be cognizant of the literature around what is HIPAA compliance or GDPR or SOC 2 or whatever that is, right? And this is why you have wonderful consultants who can help out with that. But that's really that disconnect I agree with, and then being aware of that compliance aspect.
Thank you for that. So the first question was about trust and the whole regulatory pathway and some examples. We're going to move to the next half of this conversation, which I think is crucial. Nothing with AI is going to be efficient or useful without having good data powering the actual solution. So I'd like to talk about data as our next part of the conversation. So the first question is around how do we protect patients from data? So if you think about the NHS as a whole, where I'm from, we had the NHS Federated Data Plan now. It's a big plan 1 year ago to implement data that's going to be handled by an external agency on behalf of the government to allow us to use data more productively in AI solutions. Palantir have been given out a contract. That's created a lot of controversy around having industry partners in, how we secure, what's the transparency, what are we going to do with our data going forward? And that's been hugely contentious in the UK, and it will be across the world. In that light of context, how do we protect our patients from that?
You know, it's a terrific question, and again, I'm going to come at this from a U.S. focus, right? The thing about AI is that it will only force multiply our good habits or our bad habits. And in the U.S., we simply do not share data. Our data is not transparent. If you leave my office and go to the office down the street and see a different doctor or a different hospital, your record is effectively blank, right? So, and on top of that, because we have so many legacy systems that don't speak with each other, 75% of all medical communications in the US is actually sitting on the fax machine, okay? We are single-handed, we're here talking about innovation.
We still have fax machines, right, in the US?
We still got fax machines, right? So while we talk about innovation, and there is a lot of hype on the second floor, as there is in the industry, the reality is that the healthcare industry, the fax machine industry is being kept alive by the healthcare industry, okay? So we have to acknowledge that this is a bad habit. This is a bad process. This is a bad culture when you talked about barriers. This is a massive barrier because one of the biggest promises of AI is to unlock the data, right? To help us see things that we don't see, help us predict things that we don't see, be able to communicate in ways we never have. And when we look at what's happening politically, deleting of data, the lack of interest in the underserved and most vulnerable populations, AI is in fact not going to save us, particularly the people that need the most help. And so I would say that we have a lot to fix around data hygiene before we can even think about AI, about the promise of what AI can do with the data. But the data is so critical to unleash the power of AI, and we have a lot of work to do before we even talk about that aspect of it.
Yeah, and of course, the problem with data, electronic health records, which we talked about earlier, is so fragmented. If you're going to make decisions around population health or big decisions around a system health, you have to integrate that data first and foremost. So the problems we're seeing is how do you integrate data properly, how do you manage it to make those inferences and solutions. Go to Abu Dhabi, for example, where I used to be an advisor. They have a healthcare information exchange where they collect all the data from all 50 clinics, hospitals into a central government portal. Therefore, you can deploy AI at scale and make those decisions that are much more powerful. And so we are seeing some countries globally who are thinking about the integration and the compatibility of that data as we speak. In terms of data for you, your perspective, how should we store data? How do we share data? What does it mean to people? How do we empower patients with their own data going forward? Because that's about preventative healthcare.
That's right. And I mean, I might not be the expert on this, but in the EU we have this new EU Health Data Space Act, and I mean, I see a lot of promise over there in that it allows patients to really take ownership of their own data and to share it with other healthcare professionals. Maybe they want to go to another healthcare professional and not take their history again, and so on. But what it really drives, and that's the aim of it, is to also drive innovation. So by allowing research and development companies, policymakers, regulators to access this anonymous data, and to then drive innovation. And this year we'll be talking about high quality data. So it's not some random database that you found on, I don't know, GitHub or whatever. It's like a high quality data which you can access. And this is something which is coming over the next couple of years. But I mean, I just wanted to point out on this data hygiene thing. And I think it's something which is really now impacted by the EU AI Act, and there's a specific section on data governance and requiring these manufacturers, developers, whatever, to to have systems in place to collect and also analyze data correctly and in a clean manner.
Thank you. Before we come to you, Yoav, just in a minute or two, I'm going to ask the audience to participate. So if you think of a question, just start thinking about it as we speak, and we'll come to you in a couple of minutes. Yeah, data and your perspective. I'll just get your thoughts.
So there's two aspects of it. Let's talk first about the underlying database and the quality of it. Israel is unique because it's fully nationalized, capitated system, which creates a baseline for everyone, right? Rich, poor, green, yellow, Jew, Muslim, Christian, everyone has the exact same access to the exact same services. So already there's that underlying. Obviously there's challenges with accessibility, integration, interoperability, relevance, but the underlying there is a baseline. The other thing that I've found, especially when I look at the US and especially Europe, is that there's kind of a cultural aspect of how you look at data. Like if I look at Europe, a lot of the policies there are opt-in, right? They're minimum usage, like I have to agree to use my data, and they're for explicit use. Like you, healthcare system in whatever, Germany can use my data and only the minimum amount needed for this specific thing. In Israel, those three things don't exist. So the perspective of Israel isn't to protect healthcare data, it's to maximize the potential of it safely and securely, right? We're still HIPAA, we're still GDPR, we're still compliant with everything, but there's the ability to tap into it holistically at the same baseline, which I think ultimately comes down to something cultural, right? Like my data, I see in my phone, everything. Me and my kids, everyone, my HMO has it, every hospital I've been to in Israel has it, and they can freely do with it what they want. Me as a citizen, I have no problem with that. If my data helps somebody on the other side of the planet, fantastic,
Sure.
Go for it. So the outlook is almost kind of this like cultural perspective of it that's kind of different.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, if you ask most people, are you happy to share your data for the advancement of health sciences to help people? Everyone will say yes. The question that's more difficult is how do you monetize? How do you charge for it? What does it mean? That's a difficult concept that we haven't approached, a conversation we'll have another time. So to the audience very quickly, we've got about 3 minutes. I'd love to get some audience participation. Any questions from the audience? Put your hands up. Alex.
Good afternoon. So my question to you is, how do you split the difference between using the data belonging to the patients or relevant for the patient's profiles in the purpose of the common good versus being used for research by pharma companies and making profits out of it without compensating the patients?
Yeah, that was a question I was exactly thinking about. Yeah, so up to you.
No, everything is de-identified. I want to make that clear, right? The data, everything is de-identified. Everything is, sorry?
Sorry, if I may follow up. Thank you. So, de-identifying the identification details around the patient's data is actually, let's say, sorry for the word, a trick used in order to avoid compensating the patients. We have technology like blockchain, which allows using the data without relieving the patient information and still including the patient in the financial flows. So it's not about anonymizing the data. It's about including the patients in the financial flows around medical research and compensating them, not only CROs, pharma, etc.
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you, that we're not at that point yet. I don't know of anybody, and I'm familiar with these startups that are using, various blockchain things to help monetize the long tail for the patients. We're not there yet. From the perspective of de-identification and all that, that's 100% compliant, right? The pharma companies that are doing trials at my hospital day in, day out are all compliant. They're not seeing names, whatever, right? What they're seeing and they want access to is the underlying EMR looped in with whatever, pathogenic, genomic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're tapping into that. They don't need the name of the human being. So from the perspective of the monetization, I agree with you, but I don't know of a single scaled solution that's doing this yet, that's looping in the patient for the utilization of their data. My perspective is that it's a massive big pyramid, right? If my hospital can be top of care, top of science, top of tech, that flows through immediately to the care of the patients in the hospital, right? The stuff that my team that we're working on, that we're building out, directly affects efficiency of the clinicians, it lowers burnout of the clinicians, it improves care. Like, we're building tools where we can now prove out length of stay is less, mortality rate is less. So these things do flow through, not in the perspective of cash like you say, but we're definitely seeing the effects of it.
Thank you. We kind of have to conclude there. Thank you so much for the question. And a big congratulations to our amazing audience and our staff here.